At 93 years old, Don King has seen it all.
There's a PBS show. Have you seen the show? Yes, I have. Okay, the episode is called Don King Unauthorized.
The flamboyant boxing promoter with the electric hair and billion-dollar mouth has orchestrated some of the greatest fights in history. He's made legends out of men and turned brutal violence into entertainment gold. From Muhammad Ali to Mike Tyson, King has worked with the most dangerous fighters on the planet, each one bringing their own unique challenges and headaches. But when asked about the toughest boxer he's ever faced,
you're getting me excited about me.
Well,
I gotta say, Don,
the man who built an empire on fear and manipulation gives a surprising answer. It wasn't the fighter with the hardest punch or the meanest attitude. It was the one who cost him everything he thought he controlled. The one who turned the tables on the master manipulator himself and walked away, leaving King's carefully constructed world in ruins. Now, for the first time, Don King reveals the truth about his greatest battle. A background setup. The story of Don King begins not in the glittering lights of Las Vegas, but on the gritty streets of Cleveland, Ohio. Born into poverty in 1931, King learned early that survival meant being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than everyone else around you. While other kids were playing games, young Donald was already hustling.
More so. I cannot find the words to describe nor depict.
You can't find the words to describe?
It's going to be so illustrious.
Running numbers for local bookies and absorbing the harsh lessons of street economics. But King's education in violence came at a steep price. In 1954, he killed a man during a robbery attempt claiming self-defense. The streets had taught him to fight, but now they would teach him something far more valuable. Sentenced to 4 years in prison, King didn't waste his time behind bars feeling sorry for himself. Instead, he devoured books, studying everything from Shakespeare to legal texts, transforming himself from a street thug into a calculating businessman with a silver tongue and an unquenchable thirst for power. When he walked out of those prison gates, Don King had a plan. Rise to power. Fresh out of prison, Don King faced a boxing world that wanted nothing to do with an ex-convict with wild hair and wilder ideas. The established promoters laughed at him. The athletic commissions questioned his character, and fighters' managers slammed doors in his face. But King possessed something they didn't, an unshakable belief that he could sell ice to an Eskimo and make them thank him for it.
So by the second round, when he done bounced him up and down like a basketball, I was over there in George's corner.
His breakthrough came when he convinced Muhammad Ali to let him promote a charity exhibition. That single event opened doors that had been bolted shut. Soon, King was orchestrating the impossible, the rumble in the jungle in Zaire, a fight so audacious that even seasoned boxing insiders called him crazy. But when Ali shocked the world by defeating George Foreman, King didn't just promote a fight, he created a global spectacle. From that moment, Don King wasn't just in the boxing business. He was in the boxing business. The roster of legends. With his reputation cemented, Don King assembled a stable of fighters that read like a who's who of boxing royalty. Muhammad Ali remained his crown jewel, the charismatic heavyweight whose every fight became a cultural event. Larry Holmes became his loyal soldier, defending the heavyweight title an incredible 20 times under King's promotional banner, generating millions while maintaining an unshakable respect for his flamboyant promoter. Then came Roberto Duran, the savage hands of stone from Panama, whose brutal fighting style and King's theatrical promotion created some of the most memorable welterweight battles in history. Each fighter brought their own unique challenges and rewards. Ali demanded respect and top dollar. Holmes craved legitimacy and recognition. Duran needed careful handling of his fiery Latin temperament. But managing these legends was just the beginning. King's real genius lay in understanding that he wasn't just promoting fights, he was selling dreams, creating narratives that turned athletic competitions into must-see theater. Little did he know that his greatest challenge was waiting in the wings, a young destroyer who would test every lesson he'd learned. Early challenges and conflicts. Success brought scrutiny, and Don King soon found himself fighting battles outside the ring that were just as brutal as anything happening inside it. The FBI launched investigations into his business practices, dissecting every contract and following every dollar trail. Federal agents appeared at his doorstep with search warrants, convinced that the flamboyant promoter was hiding something more sinister beneath his theatrical persona. The lawsuits came next, one after another like punches from a relentless heavyweight. Fighters accused him of stealing millions from their purses. Former business partners claimed he'd cheated them out of their rightful shares. The media painted him as a snake oil salesman in an expensive suit, a master manipulator who left broken dreams in his wake. But King had learned something valuable in those Cleveland streets and prison cells: how to survive when everyone wants to destroy you. He hired the best lawyers money could buy, crafted alibis that would make a politician jealous, and somehow always managed to slip through the legal nets that seemed designed to trap him. These battles were nothing compared to what was coming. The ultimate challenge emerges. By the mid-1980s, Don King thought he had seen everything the boxing world could throw at him. He'd handled prima donnas, managed massive egos, and survived federal investigations that would have destroyed lesser men. His formula was perfected: find the talent, control the narrative, and milk every dollar from the spectacle. He was the undisputed king of boxing promotion, a master puppeteer pulling the strings of champions. But lurking in the shadows was a different kind of fighter, one who would challenge everything King thought he knew about control and manipulation. This wasn't just another boxer looking for fame and fortune. This was a force of nature wrapped in human flesh, a psychological puzzle that even King's street-smart instincts couldn't completely decode. The fighter in question possessed a combination that terrified King more than any FBI investigation or courtroom battle ever could. Raw, devastating power coupled with an unpredictable mind that could turn on anyone at any moment. King had built his empire on reading people, on knowing exactly which buttons to push and when to push them. He was about to meet someone who would rewrite all the rules. The revelation. The answer might shock you, but Don King's toughest opponent wasn't the man with the hardest punch or the meanest reputation. It was Mike Tyson, the very fighter who made him the most money. While King had mastered the art of controlling fighters through a combination of charm, manipulation, and financial dependency, Tyson represented something entirely different: a psychological wildcard who could explode without warning. Unlike Ali's calculated defiance or Holmes's respectful disagreements, Tyson's rebellion was primal and unpredictable. King had built his career on reading people, on knowing exactly what made them tick. But Tyson was a damaged young man, carrying years of abandonment and rage, someone whose loyalty could evaporate in an instant when he felt betrayed or manipulated. King soon discovered that the same raw fury that made Tyson devastating in the ring also made him impossible to fully control outside of it. The traditional promotional playbook, lavish spending, fatherly guidance, and carefully managed public image, meant nothing to a fighter who had grown up with nothing and trusted no one. For the first time in his career, Don King had met his psychological match. The breakdown of control. The cracks in King's control over Tyson began to show almost immediately. Where other fighters had been grateful for King's guidance and financial support, Tyson grew increasingly suspicious and hostile. The young heavyweight started questioning contracts, demanding explanations for missing money, and publicly challenging King's authority in ways that shocked the boxing world. The breaking point came during Tyson's tumultuous marriage to actress Robin Givens. In a nationally televised interview, Givens painted Tyson as an unstable, violent man while cameras rolled. King watched in horror as his prized asset was humiliated on live television. But worse was Tyson's growing belief that King had orchestrated the entire spectacle for publicity. The rape conviction in 1992 should have made Tyson more dependent on King's support, but instead, it had the opposite effect. Behind bars, Tyson had time to think, to read, and to listen to people who whispered in his ear about how much money King had really made off his career. When visitors told him about the millions he'd never seen, Tyson's simmering resentment turned into open warfare. The student was about to destroy his master's empire. King's candid admission. In rare moments of honesty, Don King admits that Mike Tyson was his greatest challenge, not because of physical intimidation, but because of something far more dangerous: Tyson's complete unpredictability and growing independence. Other fighters, they wanted to be controlled, King reflects. They needed the guidance, the structure, the father figure. But Mike was different. He was like trying to hold lightning in your bare hands. King's admission reveals the true nature of his fear. For decades, he had built his empire on psychological manipulation, on making fighters believe they needed him more than he needed them. But Tyson possessed something that terrified the master manipulator, the willingness to walk away from everything, even if it meant losing millions. I could handle the FBI, the lawsuits, the media attacks, King confessed. Those were just business problems. But Mike was personal. He made me realize that all my tricks, all my smooth talking, meant nothing to someone who didn't care about consequences. He was the only fighter who ever made me feel truly powerless. The promoter who had controlled champions was finally facing someone who refused to be controlled. The aftermath and reflection. The Tyson split marked the beginning of the end of Don King's golden era. When Iron Mike finally cut ties with his longtime promoter in the late 1990s, it sent shockwaves through the boxing world and served as a blueprint for other fighters looking to escape King's grip. The man who had once seemed untouchable suddenly appeared vulnerable, and his remaining stable of fighters began questioning their own relationships with the controversial promoter. King's influence in boxing began to wane as the sport evolved beyond his old-school methods. Younger promoters emerged with different approaches, treating fighters as business partners rather than assets to be controlled. The era of lavish manipulation and paternal dominance was giving way to transparency and fighter empowerment, concepts that Tyson's rebellion had helped accelerate, but perhaps most damaging was the psychological toll. For the first time in his career, King had been outmaneuvered by one of his own fighters. The master strategist had been checkmated by someone he'd underestimated, and the boxing world had watched it happen in real time. The King had been dethroned by his own creation. Current life and final thoughts. Today, at 93, Don King remains sharp but reflective. His iconic hair now white, but his personality still larger than life. The man who once commanded rooms full of millionaires now spends his days in relative quiet, occasionally emerging for interviews or boxing events where he's treated more like a relic than a power broker. The modern boxing landscape has largely moved beyond his influence, with new promoters and sanctioning bodies operating in ways King never imagined. When pressed about his legacy, King speaks with surprising candor about the Tyson years. "Mike taught me something I thought I already knew, that you can't control what you don't understand," he admits. "I understood hunger, I understood greed, I understood fear, but I never understood that kind of raw independence. That willingness to burn everything down just to be free." King's reflection reveals a man who built an empire on reading people, only to discover that some individuals are simply unreadable. His greatest victory, discovering and promoting Mike Tyson, also became his greatest defeat, a reminder that even the most skilled manipulator can meet their match. The lesson was costly but clear. True power can't be controlled, only channeled. Don King's empire was built on control, but Mike Tyson taught him that some forces of nature can't be tamed. What do you think about their legendary battle? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more boxing stories.